Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. It's Friday. You know what that means.
Front Office Friday! Less than 3 weeks to the trade deadline edition.
Let's go. Less than 3 weeks till the trade deadline. Awesome. I can't wait. Let's kick off this show. We're taking your questions and comments. Keith, let me ask this. Do you play with Legos?
Hell yeah, I play with Legos. Legos are awesome for any age. That's not an insult. What was Isaiah Stewart thinking? That made me mad.
How dare he?
Mad. How dare you? Lego. I'm sorry. Let me go back because I was corrected many times on both Twitter and Blue Sky. I play with Lego because apparently the plural of Lego is Lego. So people were very happy to tell me that. So several were more than enthusiastic in letting me know, including two people who emailed about it. Like, why are you taking the time? Just reply with your sarcasm on the social media site where the comment was made.
They care a lot about Lego. God, that feels weird. But I guess it would be like saying sheeps, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
Somebody said, you don't call them the Orlando Magics or the Oklahoma City Thunders. And I was like, I guess, but I don't know. Whatever. It is, but Isaiah Stewart's wrong. Like Legos.
Whatever you want to call them, they're awesome.
Yeah. But the real Legos, not the other stuff that they try to pass off as Legos. Bricks with a Z and that nonsense.
Right. Yeah. Where they say they work with Lego or whatever, but they don't really. Like, it's not quite the perfect fit. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like the imitation brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I will say though, when we were kids, like, I don't remember us getting the sets with like, this is how you build a castle. Like, it was just here's a bunch of
figure it out
in a bag, or a box, and have fun. I think the now, like, these sets, they're so like detailed and like crazy. Like, we went through a period during the pandemic where like we built, I think, every Harry Potter Lego set that was around. Like, that became every gift for my daughter. Ray sorry, this made me laugh. Ray says some of us don't got Lego money, Keith, but leave us to play with our Temu Legos. And see, on Temu, they probably are plural with the S.
They probably that's their distinction there.
Yeah. I fine. Play with whatever bricks with a Z you want to play with, whatever. But yeah, Legos are great, man. They're awesome. I don't have the creativity to build my own stuff though. I need to build like sets with directions.
Yeah.
Like I can't. I'm out.
My daughter got one for Christmas, and it got a Lego table for Christmas, and she loves it. She loves using that, and she loves playing. She does the whole thing. She'll go through all the directions step by step and all that. See, personally, I hate assembling things. Like, the worst thing in the world is when I see some assembly required. I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. I've got a new chair here for my studio that has been out in my garage for 2 weeks because I don't want to go through the process of assembling it.
It takes like 5 minutes to put together. Come on, man.
Yeah, not everything, but
all right,
anyway,
I'll come over and do it for you.
I don't enjoy the process of assembly, which is funny because I like building stuff out. Like, I like building rosters, I like building a show and putting things together that way. But actually assembling stuff, I don't enjoy it. But my daughter loves Legos. She loves Legos, and so they're everywhere. And yeah. Anyway,
you're great.
I
like how you tried to get us on track there with I like building rosters and building a show. So
I tried.
I suppose we should talk about basketball, but that was basketball related. It came out of a comment on the thing. I will say, guys, if you do like Legos and basketball, what this is, if you missed it, Miles Turner loves Legos. And the Pacers and Pistons last night had a little dust up. Guys were kind of yelling at each other and stuff. And Isaiah Stewart pointed at Miles Turner and said, "You build Legos." Like, it was like he was, I don't know, like he was going to trash him or something. I don't really understand where that was supposed to go.
Was it the dubbed over version, the censored version of White Men Can't Jump? Your mother's an astronaut.
Yeah, right.
It's like that.
Yeah, I really like.
It's like that level of insult.
What's happening there? But it was I will say one last thing on this topic though. Miles Turner was showing off at one point all the sets he's built, And because like he's a huge person and he has his like giant hands, he's holding the Lego Titanic and he's like holding it at an angle. And I had such anxiety watching it
Don't drop it.
because one time our daughter had finished the Lego set and we were trying to move it. And I was like, I got it. I'll carry it on the cardboard it was built on. And I dropped it
Oh no.
on the floor and it shattered into pieces. And it was like, just like, it's still to this day, it's probably the worst thing I've ever done to her.
And it happened in slow motion, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, yeah. And I can still hear the sound of it like hitting the ground and like stuff, blowing up. But yeah. All right. We'll get into actual basketball now.
All right. Let's start here.
People
We've got, would Ben Simmons get a buyout? Would the Nets ask for any money back? What teams would be willing to sign him who are under the second apron? Well, they had to be under the first apron even in order to sign him. But I think that last question is really the first question, because if there aren't teams that are under the first apron that want to sign Ben and that Ben wants to go to, then he's probably not taking a buyout. And I think that dynamic is more important than ever, since the number of teams that could sign a player like a Ben Simmons or anyone making above the mid-level exception, that pool is just smaller than it was under the prior CBA. So that's really the first question we have to ask when we look at these guys that are making more than the MLE. Is there a team that wants that player? Because if the answer is no, then the players, why give back any money if you're the player to sit at home?
Yeah, I do every year. I do a big piece that runs on trade deadline day. Like we run it in the evening after the trade deadline is passed and we have all the deal details that kind of goes through the buyout market and players. And a big part of it this year is going to be an explainer why the buyout market might be a little bit of a weird thing this season, because they're in a spot where exactly what you said, some of these players may say, all right, I can't get to, and I'm not using them as a great example because they're my team, but I can't get to the Celtics. I can't get to the Bucks. I can't get to the Timberwolves or to, maybe even teams like the Cavs and some of these other teams that are a little more expensive. So guys may look at it and say, it's just not worth it. Like, why would I give you back even the equivalent of the minimum salary because I can't get to the team I want to get to. I do think it's funny, Coin Baker. Yeah, I like that he probably just a typo, but he wrote like bye out.
I know.
That makes me laugh because that's kind of what happens. Like bye, you're out. So I like that. That just makes me laugh. So so in the spirit of his question though, we can eliminate a third of the league because 9 teams are over the first apron, so they can't sign him anyway. And then you have Dallas and the Warriors, who are they're so close that they would not be able to sign him either. It would just cause issues. Like they'd have to really time a signing. So that's 11 teams. So that's a third of the league. If we go through it, Atlanta's not going to do it. He's already on Brooklyn. Charlotte would have no reason. The Bulls don't make sense. Pistons, probably not. You kind of have Asar Thompson already playing that role-ish that Simmons would play for you as a defensive-minded, ball-handling wing. Houston, you have Amon Thompson doing that there. Indiana probably doesn't make sense. Clippers, maybe. I could maybe see the Clippers as a team. Memphis, maybe. Oklahoma City, if you went to Oklahoma City, I would just assume, well, now he's going to be awesome again. Like I would just instantly, especially if that beating they put on the Cavs. And then after that, you're into like Sacramento, San Antonio, and then a bunch of tanking teams that I won't run through. San Antonio could be interesting, I guess. Like, give them one more ball handler, playmaker. That'd be a little interesting, but yeah. Good question. But yeah, we're just, so everybody has it clear. Anybody who makes more than the non-taxpayer mid-level can't go to an apron team after a buyout.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the buyout market, and the final piece I want to say on this is keep in mind, the buyout market does not become a thing till after the trade deadline.
Correct.
Because teams don't want to consider buying out a player and then go, oh, shoot, now we really needed that salary in a trade. So after the trade deadline comes and goes, that's when you'll start hearing about players potentially and teams potentially considering buyouts. But again, I wouldn't expect as strong of a buyout market as we've seen in years past because Just there's not as many teams that you can get to if you do get bought out.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, let's go to this one because this is the other big news of the day.
Yeah.
How concerned should Philly be right now? Is Embiid done for? Yeah, it's not great. Joel Embiid hasn't played in like a week and a half, 2 weeks now, and practiced and immediately had knee swelling and is back on the back on the injured list again. There's no real injured list, but
7 to 10 days. Yeah.
7 to 10 days before they're even going to reevaluate him. And who knows? I mean, who knows what it looks like? It was very interesting. Every Friday, Tim Bontemps and Brian Windhorst do like a notebook piece for ESPN. And in there, when they were talking about Philadelphia, one of the things that I'm going to very much paraphrase it, but it was basically like Philly's got a really tough schedule coming up. And if they don't get it together, they could very easily start pivoting towards, hey, let's do what we can to bottom out and try to keep our pick this year. That's
so crazy.
Gave me the opportunity to use my joke that they become the Philadelphia top sixers because the pick is top six protected. So that's where it would go. But yeah, I mean, they're kind of just close enough to maybe getting into that top six range. I mean, they're not that far off, in the column from those
let's look at the league.
So, yeah. Yeah. I mean, not that far off.
But look, I mean, in terms of games back, I mean, they've won. It's the win column for the contending teams. We're looking at the loss column.
The loss column, yeah.
For these teams, we're looking at the win column. Like, are they going to catch the Jazz? Have 5 less wins than them? Are they catching them? No. Probably best case is maybe they could fall behind the Nets and the Blazers, and that's best case if they really push down. But then, what do you do? Like, are you telling Tyrese Maxey go home? What about Paul George? Then the NBA gets involved with their rulings and all this. It gets tricky, but. I mean, all I know right now is the Oklahoma City Thunder have to be smiling ear to ear because they get this pick if it's anything other than top 6.
Yeah, I think it gets mixed up in with like Houston's pick, and there's a bunch of weirdness. But yeah, ultimately it will go to the Thunder if it's not top 6. And for you to feel safe, you'd have to land somewhere in the range of like 3 or 4 to even feel really good about your chances to keep it. Probably 4. It's pretty rare that more than 2 teams jump into the top 4. But that would be scary, right? Like if you're like 5th or 6th even going into the lottery, I'm sitting there like nobody jump, unless it's us, obviously, right? Then we'd love it. But yeah, I mean, just really kind of a messy situation there in Philadelphia. They've got certainly some stuff to figure out where they want to go because they have not made the push that they hope for. Can you flip it back to just like the regular Eastern Conference?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think this gives a little bit of good context. They're now 2 full games behind the Bulls for the final spot in the play-in tournament. They're 5 games behind the Pistons. So you're really talking the line is, could they catch Chicago? Making up 5. We're halfway through the season now. Making up 5 or more games, not impossible. It happens and it happens all the time, but it's hard because you're really having to then put some pressure and hope other teams start really falling apart. And yeah, I mean,
and they have. Look, they've had every opportunity to move up. The Bulls have lost 3 in a row, but the Sixers have lost 4 in a row. So there you go.
Yeah. Is Embiid done for? I think you have to really start now to think about like, all right, we're probably not getting more than 50 games on the high end out of him and hope those 50 games are awesome. And that's where you can go. That's where you really want to. Yeah, that Bulls game's a big one.
That's a big one.
That's like the only winnable game in that stretch.
I was just thinking that, man. I mean, look at this. Like, would they? I don't think everything that's on the screen right now: Indiana, Milwaukee, Denver, Cleveland, Chicago, LA, Sacramento, Denver, Boston, Dallas. I don't know. I'm assuming Kyrie is back by that Dallas game. I don't know about Luka, but I would assume that the 76ers will not be the favorite going into any of those matchups, except maybe Chicago. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't even think they will because that's on the road.
Yeah, that's true. So there's usually a point and a half cushion just from being the road team.
Yeah, and they're not going to lose all those games. They'll. I mean, they beat the Celtics in Boston on Christmas Day, so they'll win a game somewhere in that mix. It's just very messy for them. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We've had a couple questions. I'm not going to pull them up, but people, should they trade, Embiid? Who's trading for Embiid right
Right.
now? Because Philly's not just going to be like, thanks, salary dump. Here you go. So that starts to become kind of a messy situation with that. So yeah, it is really tough.
Man, I mean, going from being one of the teams that we thought could maybe contend this season, they got the biggest free agent signing of the summer with Paul George,
Mm-hmm.
and not the season these Sixers were hoping to have.
Yeah. Nope.
Joe asks, when more teams show interest in a player, doesn't that make other teams exit stage left? So are there teams that just say, nope, not getting into a bidding war, we're out? Sure, that can't. I mean, every team's going to respond differently, but there's also a limited number of assets that are out there on the market that are available. So it's really just supply and demand. But sure, I mean, there will be teams that say, no, thank you. We won't, this is what we can offer, and we won't raise the price. We're not getting into a bidding war. There's other teams who say, oh man, we really need this guy to put us over the top or whatever, for whatever reason they want that player, and they'll up their offer and do what they can to compete. That's a team by team situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes when more teams show an interest, the reason that leaks is because so Cam Johnson, great example. We'll get into some stuff about him here for a minute. We're hearing more and more and more teams that are interested in Cam Johnson. And the reason why is the Nets are now trying to create a bidding war.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get everybody, hey, you better come with real offers here, because if you don't,
we'll keep him.
We're going to keep him, or someone else is going to beat you out. So that becomes the kind of the big thing there. So yeah, but definitely there are some teams that they very much, if trade talks get to a point for a player where they're like, I'm out, they're out. Like, and they just, they walk away, and there are certain organizations in the league that set, like, this is the price we're willing to pay. This is our line, and they will not go past it.
Yeah.
And they will kind of, move away from that. Just to close the book on the Embiid stuff. Jeremy's right. He has a trade restriction because of his thing. It was just more of a, in general, would they trade him, was what I was thinking, not necessarily at the deadline.
Are they actually going to? But like this summer, could they hit the point where they just say he's injured all the time? Do we move him? That type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Cam Johnson, the latest Cavs are interested. That came from Joe Varden, who,
that's interesting.
I hesitate to say covers the Cavs, because he covers the league as a whole now, but he's covered the Cavs for years
when LeBron was there.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty tight with that organization. So makes a lot of sense for them. Boy, they got it handed to them last night by the Thunder. I thought Kenny Atkinson's quote after, it felt like we were trying to score on 7 pit bulls at once. And he's like, yes, 7. Like, he's like, it felt like there were that many out there. I mean, they played. And if I'm the Thunder now, what's really, really scary for the rest of the NBA, beyond the Chet Holmgren's coming back, they have 1 million first-round picks. The Thunder now this is how we're going to play, and you're going to adjust to us. Yeah. And when a team gets that's usually a really good sign for how successful they're going to be, because that means they know who they are, how they want to play, and they're going to force you to do that. They were everywhere in that first quarter. I mean, I basically stopped watching midway through the second quarter and was only kind of over half checking in because they blitzed them so bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and impressive without Hartenstein, that big man advantage that the Cavs had didn't end up mattering because the Thunder were so good.
For anybody who didn't have a chance to watch, started Lou Dort on Evan Mobley, and Lou Dort just got ridiculously physical with him. It was like, I'm just going to keep hitting you and pushing you further and further out. And the Cavs, this was the first time this year that the Cavs really, it felt like they kind of shrunk, from the challenge. Couple things with Cleveland. I'm not saying this is an issue with them. They're still one of the best teams in the league, but just little things I'm watching and picking up as they've lost a handful of games here. Teams that can put really good, long, quick, physical defenders on Donovan Mitchell, that's hurt the Cavs offense quite a bit. And then the other thing is teams are now starting. OKC did it too. Indiana did it kind of relentlessly the other night. Teams are starting to isolate their weaker defenders and really go at them almost like playoff style. And that's now the good thing is you have tape on it and you have 40 some odd games to figure it out.
Right.
Right. Kenny Atkinson can get in the lab and say, all right, we're definitely going to see this. Like, we're not going to play Max Strus. He's too important to us, but teams are finding him. How do we cover for that? That's the thing now that he's got time to figure out and try things in games. And that it's when you've built the cushion that the Cavs have, they can experiment with some stuff, because if they lose a game or two, it doesn't really matter.
Let's go. Oh, I like this comment. Oh shoot, where did it go? There it is. Got mad too. Just got a Lego Millennium Falcon for my birthday. Love that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool, man. I don't know. Whatever. I already ranted about Legos. We don't need to.
We won't get back on that. Senpai said one team dumb enough to trade for / pay for Jimmy is Chicago. They've been there. Done that. They've done that.
Yep. Yeah.
That life.
Yeah. Jimmy Butler does a pretty good job of not only does he take the bridge all the way down, he does horrible things to the ashes as well. And then there's no going back. There's no day. I would say that's pretty unlikely that happens. Yeah. I still think if he gets traded, it'll be Phoenix, just because history tells me players get where they want to go in the league. But Ramona Shelburne had a really great piece today for ESPN. It's pretty long, but it's really in depth. My three kind of four quick takeaways that I'll give on it. One, really good history of kind of how we got here. Like, it was no one thing. It was just a series of things that caused Butler and the Heat to sour on each other. The importance of a guy like Udonis Haslem, which is, people were like, why do they keep wasting roster spots on Udonis Haslem? She really gets into why a guy like him being on the roster versus on the coaching staff, or just a vet coming around, why that really, was, important to them. Then the two pieces that were good. One, the people close to the Heat, we don't want them back. Like, we don't want them back on the team. And then the last was, which is super important, Jimmy Butler hasn't even begun to pull the stuff he can to make things uncomfortable for Miami. So
that's crazy.
He's supposed to play tonight. He's not on the injury report. His suspension's over. They're playing Denver at home. Let's see what that looks like.
Like, what do you think that means? Like, he hasn't even started to pull the stuff that he can pull with, that's got me. Obviously, if you're Miami, you don't want to deal with this crap anymore. You don't want to deal with any of this. You don't want to deal with any of this stuff. But from an outside perspective, I'm kind of curious to know what else he can pull. What are those things that you could potentially do?
We're going to go back a little bit here in the front office show history, but we did a whole thing on things we remember. This was probably 3 years ago. We did a whole thing on things we NBA moments we wish we could have been there for. And my all time is the one where Andrew Bynum was shooting the ball wherever he touched it.
Oh.
So he'd get a rebound 85 feet from the hoop and shoot. I want to see the video of that practice so badly, because it's so absurd and just sounds so funny to me. But I mean, you could start doing that. I mean, right, there was that story out of Minnesota where he came and he grabbed the end of bench guys and went out and repeatedly destroyed Towns and Wiggins in that practice. It was which was weird, because he's like, you need me, trade me. I didn't really understand the logic behind all that of you need me, but you're going to trade me kind of thing. I didn't really get it, but I don't know. Does he start parking in Pat Riley's space at the facility, set up a coffee cart at mid-court? I'm not sure what that means.
Oh man, yeah, right. That would be great. He just starts selling coffee mid-game. That'd be fantastic.
Right. Yeah, just starts chugging coffees in the middle of the game.
I think the other Jimmy moment that I would like to see, Andrew Bynum, obviously with that one's an all-time. In terms of moments you'd like to be there for, the Kobe trash talking stuff during practices, you'd love to be there for that. But the other one has got to be Jimmy Butler with the Wolves taking the third string guys.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
Yeah. I would love to be there. Yes, I would love to be there for that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. In the Kobe one, it's funny because part of me wants to see the Michael Jordan stuff, but then I'm like, you read those stories and they're Kobe never took it fully over the line.
Yeah.
Like MJ was like, "You're my teammate, but I'm also going to destroy you, like mentally." And it's like that's not that like that. You went a little too far at times. So yeah.
All right, let's get into this question here. Would Utah trade anything to the Lakers to remove protection on the 27 pick? I mean, I'm sure when we say anything, sure, I'm sure they'd give. Hey, we'll give you a second rounder if you remove that protection. I'm sure the Jazz would do
Yeah.
that, right? I mean, they're I'm sure they'd have some interest in doing it. Now, do they have enough interest to where they're giving the Lakers anything they want? Or probably not, but
Yeah, like he put J1 put example 25 Wolves first. I would not do that
no,
because that's just too much. I mean, because there's no like, yeah, you remove the protection, but like how likely is it in 2027? And it's top four, right?
top four.
How likely is it the Lakers are going to be one of the four worst teams in the NBA? Or
Sure.
have lottery luck to jump up and then you take it. That doesn't seem overly likely to me anyway. So I don't know. But yeah, if you were talking like a second, yeah, maybe. But that's something you would do next year,
Yeah.
or in 26, 27. You would do it then and see, all right, what does it look like to do that? Or if the Lakers came and were like, hey, we need to do that because for some reason they want the pick to convey right away. Like you could see stuff like that, but there's I probably not. Would be my guess.
I see it more as like a throw in a deal or a bargaining chip in a bigger deal rather than something you specifically target, like the Jazz saying we really want this protection out of here. It would be more, hey, we're gonna have a conversation about Colin Sexton or something, and hey, would you be willing to remove? Could we get a first and you remove the protection, or and that would just be part of the back and forth, part of the negotiation.
Yeah, and it's important to remember. I mean, this is. It's probably for a lot of people that are watching this, it's probably been that way forever. But yeah, it's been about like 7 years, I think, at least, that teams can change protections on a pick. It used to be you couldn't. Once it was gone, that was it. It was locked into what it was. Now you can change protections. And you could put protections on picks that aren't even your pick. Like you can chunk up the pick if you needed to. We've seen that happen a couple times.
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's go here. If you get waived as a two-way player, could you go back to an Exhibit 10 contract?
Yeah, good question. A little bit of a nerdy one here from Dennis, so I love it, of course. It's a little complicated. You don't go back to an Exhibit 10 because Exhibit 10s are only an off-season thing. But what happens is the main reason behind an Exhibit 10 is if you then go play in the G League for that team's affiliate for it's usually 60 days. You then get your full whatever your negotiated Exhibit 10 bonus was. You get that full amount. So that is something where, as you kind of look at it, by the time we're seeing two-way movement and that, we're already past that. Every once in a while, what you'll see is in the summertime, like if a guy's on a 2-year two-way, sometimes a team will waive him at like the end of June, beginning of July. Then they'll re-sign the player to an Exhibit 10 because we don't want him on a two-way, but we still want him in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see that. So you can do it that way. But like right now at this point, you're not there. And at this point, anybody who's on an Exhibit 10 has either fulfilled the obligation for it or they're not going to because we're deep enough into the year.
All right, that's good clarification there. Let's go here. Senpai said, will we see teams move a first for multiple seconds? Which we saw, like, was it? I'm trying to remember. We had it happen last year. I thought it happened like wasn't it Denver? But it was a specific circumstance, or maybe it was Phoenix.
Yeah, it was Denver and Phoenix. That's how that pick ended up getting moved around in the Nick Richards trade. Too. It was all related to that where Phoenix did it because what Phoenix needed to do is Phoenix needed additional assets. And then we have seen this happen once in a while. It's pretty rare. Teams would rather, and we've seen a couple of these too. They would rather do like it's much more of an NFL style trade where it's I'm going to trade my first for a future first plus a second. We have seen that happen a couple times. Where this will probably start to come into play is Oklahoma City, Brooklyn, these teams that are holding so many picks that already have pretty full rosters. Brooklyn's on a great example right now because they're in the middle of transition, but OKC is they've got a pretty full roster. They have all these picks. They may hit a point where it's all right. Yeah, we want to kind of kick a pick down the line, especially if it's going to be like, hey, our own pick or the worst pick we have is 28. Yeah, maybe they'll say, yeah, we'll bump that for a couple seconds or something. We'll see how that comes together.
All right, let's go here. Happy Front Office Friday. All this Butler drama is distracting folks from Cade Cunningham. He needs more buzz. Most improved player for sure. Well, I do agree that Cade needs more buzz. There should be more focus on him, more attention on him. I think he's having a phenomenal season. What he's doing for Detroit right now, and the Pistons certainly look to be on the rise, which is great to see the way they've been the last few years. I'm with you 100%. Cade Cunningham, we need to pay more attention to this man. Is he most improved? I don't know. He's in the mix.
Last year, he'll be in the mix because everything is better this year. The most improved is generally goes to somebody who takes a pretty big leap from kind of nowhere. So I don't want to get into it should be this because I'd be doing it on the fly and I have not given
we'd forget players and
and that's not fair to anybody. But more buzz for Cade, more buzz for the Pistons, 100%. I mean, they're playing pretty well. I think Cade Cunningham, bigger concern is I think there's a chance he's going to make All NBA. I think it's a factor in All NBA now too that enough people aren't thinking about because people are like he's not one of the 15 best players in the league. But 10 guys are already eliminated from being eligible for All NBA that would normally be in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to take those guys out of the mix. We got to backfill, which that is coincidentally something where the league, the teams, the players, and the Players Association, a lot of people are starting to take notes on because it's like, wait a minute, we're going to start getting some kind of bogus All NBA selections where it's like that guy, if we had a fifth team, they would have been there, but they got third team because 10 other guys can't make it. And then there's contractual stuff that comes into that. So it's something people are thinking about. There's a little bit of a kind of moment happening, I would say, in the league right now with some of the stuff. What's one of your favorite terms? Unintended consequences, right? That's where we're at with this.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go here. Can the Pistons trade Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Pelicans in a Brandon Ingram deal? The Pelicans waive him and allow the Pistons to re-sign him. Oh, the Zydrunas Ilgauskas. No, that cannot happen. It used to be. Remember when they tried to dissuade teams from doing that? It used to be you could go right back, and then they said, "Okay, we're going to make you sit out a month if you're going to do that." And then guys went, "Cool, I'll take a month off."
I'll take a month off. Yeah,
and then now it's a year.
So,
well, it's a year or until the end of the season.
Yeah, well, it depends on when it happens, but if it's in the same season, there's a restriction on it. For that year, or we go there with that. So now where it gets a little weird is if they did it right now and then the Pelicans retraded Tim Hardaway Jr. and then he was waived, then he could because now he's gone to a third team. That was the Andrew Bogut situation. Fun aside with that, when it was like, oh, this is going to happen, and he wanted to go back to the Warriors, and it was like he's going to get moved to a third team. The league and the Players Association had to actually sit down and be like, well, we didn't think this would ever happen, so how do we want to handle it? And then they hashed it out and figured it out where they want.
Which I think is something key to remember in all this stuff that we talk about with the collective bargaining agreement. We have to remember that it's not impossible for them once it's set and they complete it. Yeah, it's mostly done, but they can also adjust to things on the fly. There is flexibility in it if both sides agree to make changes and do things. So when people ask, well, could you, like the suggestion that we've made for ever since the new CBA came out, that tier 1 apron team shouldn't have the restriction of having to send out more salary than they take back in a trade that should be a tier 2 restriction. Could they change that? Yes, they could. They would just have to sit down and kind of have that conversation. The NBA and the NBPA would have to collectively decide that was going to be a shift that they were going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's when I really think through it, I always go back to my former life where I worked I did a lot with contract work with Disney. And one of the things with our various unions was there's always these things called side letter agreements, which are some situation came up that we weren't anticipating. We want to address it. So we would side letter it. It doesn't become a portion of the main agreement until probably the next time we're sitting down to hash that out. But we're going to put it in the side letter for now because we're going to cover it, because nobody wants to do these things on the fly and figure it out. Perfect example of side lettering, COVID. All of the COVID stuff they did was all side lettered. Then what happened was a lot of that stuff became part of the current CBA we're in right now, where they put it in, and some of the changes were really good. Like, it used to be, you were so injured in the first month of the season, you could get the hardship exception to sign a 16th player to your roster, but you had to sign them to a standard contract, a regular contract. Now, teams were like, well, we'll just make it non-guaranteed because we don't know if we're going to have this guy all year. So now they've just made it, hey, if you're using a hardship, you can do a 10-day. Like, and that came out of COVID because that's where that grew out of. That's a perfect example of, let's just be smarter about this and let's do this. It worked great now. So yeah, I think we'll see some of the, so I don't think we're going to this summer. Like, but I think, I don't know that we make it all the way to the end of this CBA with all these rules in place, because they're going to want to give it a couple of transaction cycles to see what does it look like, what were the impacts, because they're not going to, we do it, and you and I do it too, and obviously so do fans. We make snap judgments all the time on this stuff. They're going to be a little bit more, let's let this play out a little further.
Right. And they're going to want to see, for sure. But because you don't want to change something and then go back and go, oh, well, it turns out that was just a small sample size problem and it actually was fine. And yeah. Glenn asks, any idea why Trey Jemison got a 2-year two-way deal? Lakers have some high hopes from him. Well, remember, I mean, just by being a two-way deal, it's inherently a non-guaranteed deal. You could swap these guys in and out as much as you.
Well, they're guaranteed. They're guaranteed, but they don't hit the cap.
They're not taking up your cap space. So that's the issue. So if you want it to be a 2-year deal, that's fine if you're the Lakers, because then you've got the upside of, hey, if it works out, we've got him on a 2-way contract next year as well. And so we've got some certainty there. I think that's the benefit of doing it that way. I don't think necessarily that making it a 2-year deal is like a sign that, oh, they're locked in, that this guy is going to be great forever. It's just they're giving themselves a little bit of upside in that if it does work out great, hey, we get it. Instead of he hits free agency this year and then we have to give him a full roster spot or something like that, now we've got him for another year on a 2-way.
100%. And I think the thing to keep in mind too, after we pass the point where 2-way contracts are guaranteed, which that happened on the league-wide date for the 2-ways too, and then 2-way changes is, I believe this year it's March 4th is the last year you could always waive a guy and convert a guy after. The last day to sign a 2-way, I think, is March 4th. I'd have to double check that date, but it's in early March. But generally what we've seen is the trend has been when we get to this point of the year, it becomes a 2-year 2-way, because the team wants, hey, if this guy pops and really becomes good, but we don't have a roster spot for him to convert him, we want to have it under control, the player under control a little bit. I know I told you this privately. I really like Trey Jemison. I think he can actually play. I think he is a guy who, if you go back and look, when the Grizzlies were a complete dumpster fire of a mess of a team last year with injuries, he got a chance to play real minutes, started some games. He actually played pretty well in the NBA. And then his G League minutes are really good. And the one thing that tends to really translate level to level to level, whether it be college to G League to Europe to the pros, is rebounding. If you're a good rebounder at one level, you're almost always a pretty good rebounder at the other levels. And he's a really, really good rebounder. So I'm excited. Now, what I'm not overly thrilled about is JJ Redick saying, well, it gives us a chance to do more double big lineups and those things. I'm okay with going double big when LeBron's not on the court. Fine. I actually don't have any real issue with that. But I know people keep beating the drum for Lakers need a starting center and put AD at the 4. Yeah, maybe, but that means LeBron at the 3, and that's not fixing a lot of your problems.
So, and I talked about this on the Lakers Nation podcast that went out this morning. The idea of going with 2 bigs and specifically mentioning it when you bring in, it was interesting because JJ mentions, bringing in Jemison, and then says, oh, but he's not the backup over Jackson Hayes or anything, but I might play him with AD. And I'm like, that's interesting. The Lakers are one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA right now. They're 28th in rebounds per game. And if you're putting him out there with AD, you're putting more size, more physicality out there on the floor and giving yourself a rebounding edge. Right now, the numbers say that Jackson Hayes and Anthony Davis, it's a small sample size, but those two on the floor don't produce any kind of positive returns when it comes to rebounding the basketball. So I think it'll be situational. And I agree. I look at it this way, Keith. If you think that Anthony Davis is a 4, only a 4, that's not correct. If you think Anthony Davis is a 5 and only a 5, that's not correct. The great thing about Anthony Davis is he can play either spot. And what you want to have is a roster that can respond to the situation in front of you and play him at the 5 or the 4. Over the last few years, he's been almost completely, like 100% of his minutes have been at the 5. I do think that's where the vast majority of his minutes are going to go. You just want the option for when the situation calls for it to put him back at the 4.
100%. And I very firmly believe that there's a world. I mean, if LeBron hangs on for 5 more years, then it probably is different. But if LeBron's done in like another couple of years, I could very much see AD moves over to the 4 full time and they get a viable starting center next to him. Now, if it's like 5 years, well, then AD's going to probably be too old to be a 4 at that point. And who even knows what it'll look like by then? You might have to be guarding out to 45, 50 feet away.
Right.
The way the game keeps,
you have to widen the court or something.
Yeah. I think it'll be, but yeah, I just wanted to put that out there about Trey Jemison because we hadn't really talked about it on the show, but I like him. I think he can actually play.
Yeah, excited to see what he can do out there. Let's go here. Knowing what you know now, would you have declined Cowboy Bruce Brown's club option and front-loaded Scotty and Quick's new deals?
It caught my eye because of the Cowboy Bruce Brown
part.
Like that made me laugh. You can't front-load deals like that. Unlike in the NFL where you can really drastically front-load a deal, you can only very minimally front-load a deal in the NBA.
You can still make them declining contracts.
You can make them declining, but in the case of Scotty Barnes, who signed a max extension, you can't do that because you now a thing I'm very much in favor of, especially on the 35% max, and I think this should be something they should allow teams to do is the let's say it's I'm just going to 5 years, 300 million because we're going to be there eventually.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at 5 years, 300 million, I would like to see them allow a team to say, okay, rather than it going 45, 50, 55, up like that, I would like to see them allow a team to say, we're going to flip the hits. The money does not change, but the more money is in the front the first year, and then it staggers down as it goes. So when the player is in year, because to get to 35%, unless you qualify through all NBA and all that stuff, you have to be a 10-year service guy, which means even for the youngest guys coming in, you're probably 30. So that would be by the time you get there, your age 30 season, when you're probably still in your prime, is your most expensive season. And then it tailors down from there. That's a change I'd love to see them put in.
Yeah.
And allow the team, hey, it doesn't change anything that the player makes. They make the same amount of money. We're just going to flip it. I think that would be a good change. But to answer Delish 007's question, you couldn't front load Scotty Barnes at all because he signed a max. Quickly, they could have front loaded a little bit. But even he was close enough to a max, it would have got super tight.
And Keith, I talked about this a little bit on the basketball bulletin this morning, but I actually, should they have declined Bruce Brown's team option? Well, we know that they had this option in there. They picked it up specifically to trade him. And I think the problem the Raptors have now is that he was hurt for so much of the season. And at $23 million, it's a high enough number to where teams they have to give up something in order to get him. And I think it's given teams a little bit of pause that, had he been playing well all season, they'd probably be going full force after him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe it has diluted the market a bit for him, just the fact that he hasn't played for the majority of the season. But I love what the Raptors are doing. I love that the rumblings out there that what they're doing is now positioning themselves as a team to say, hey, we can be the third team and we can offer over $30 million in expiring contracts, obviously for a price, but we can do that. So I think this is a really smart pivot by the Raptors, who thought they would have a bunch of teams going after Bruce Brown. Maybe that market isn't as strong as they were hoping it would be, but now they're still able to flip and say, you know what, but look what's happening. Literally every trade that's happened so far, Keith, has included an expiring contract. Clearly there's value behind those expiring deals. The Raptors can go, oh, you guys want Jimmy Butler, whoever, and the team getting him back only wants expirings, and you guys don't have those? Well, we do. Let's talk. I think the Raptors are making a very, very smart move here, the way they're positioning themselves on the market.
Yeah, and if we go back and hop in the time machine and go back, remember before last season even ended, the Raptors signed Kelly Olynyk to his extension, and that signaled we're not going to be a cap space player this summer. And I think what they knew was we're going to give Emmanuel Quickly a new contract. Where he was a big part of that trade. He was arguably the biggest part of that trade with the Knicks. RJ Barrett's a nice player, but I think Quickly was the guy they really wanted. There, we just got a Twitter thing, and I was so hopeful. It was my prediction. I told you it wasn't.
Keith predicted that we were going to get a trade that happened while we were live during the show.
I just had a feeling this morning like we were going to get a trade while we were doing the show, and I just saw the notification, but it was not a trade, so, unfortunately. But yeah, so I think Toronto looked at it and said, all right, well, if we're declining Bruce Brown, sure, it's money off the books, but it's not changing anything functionally for us. We're not going to be a cap space team because we're going to give Quickly a bunch of money. We extended Kelly Olynyk, and now it turned Brown into, at the very least, it's $23 million in expiring money. And there are still teams that are like, yeah, we'd like Bruce Brown. He's certainly not. No one's going to give him big money off of this contract. Right. Like he's probably going to go back into the range of the taxpayer MLE amount, some of the regular MLE, depending on how the second half of the season goes for him. But yeah, I think Toronto did okay. Interesting with folks kind of saying Toronto could be, some reporting out of Toronto, they're like poking around being like, hey, we're happy to help jump in on a Jimmy Butler trade if anybody wants. Like we'll help facilitate it there. I don't think that means like we'll take Bradley Beal, because I also don't think he'd turn down his no trade to go to Toronto. But just interesting, that's kind of Toronto's poking around trying to jump in.
All right, let's go here. Any updates on expansion? Do you have something? Because I haven't seen anything.
No, there really hasn't been anything. The reason I flagged this was Adam Silver will do a big press conference next week. The NBA's in Paris. So he'll do a big press conference there. There's going to be probably there'll be multiple topics discussed, but on someone will ask about NBA expansion. I'm fairly certain. He's also going to be asked very heavily, because it's in Paris. He will get asked about the NBA, the interest in an NBA Europe League. For anybody who hasn't been following this, Adam Silver has not even said it's a, he has openly said we're interested in a league in Europe. That doesn't mean it's a division of the NBA in Europe. It doesn't mean it's like that champion will play the NBA champion and stop all this world champion nonsense or anything. I think eventually that's probably where it would go. But basically what he's looking at is, we already run the most successful basketball league on the planet. Why wouldn't we go to some of the top European clubs and say, hey, we want to be a part of NBA Europe instead of Euro League? And that's potentially where this could go to. They're definitely looking at doing something like this. This was also a question that came from Twitter, because I assume he's going to be asked about this as well. Maverick Carter is starting, or let me rephrase, because that's not the right way to put it. He's not starting league. He's part of a group that is trying to raise, I think it's $5 billion to do a startup league to basically challenge the NBA in some form or fashion. It sounds like it's like we want to have a real league with men's and women's teams that will play, and they'll try to challenge the NBA and WNBA out there as another option for players to go to. I assume he'll get asked about that as well, where it becomes a thing where it's like, hey, what do you think about this? LeBron James came out and said he's not involved. Like he said, I'm not involved in this. Now, no one's going to believe it, because people are going to be like, that's his guy. Of course, LeBron's involved. But LeBron was very clear he's not involved, because LeBron's made it not a secret. He wants to be involved in the Las Vegas expansion team. And it seems like whatever group LeBron's a part of at the time is probably going to get that Las Vegas expansion team, and he's going to be a part of that. It's a pretty poorly kept secret at this point that Las Vegas and Seattle would have to screw up to not be the next two cities to get NBA teams whenever it is that they expand.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be those two. I think expansion is coming to the NBA, but yeah, I don't think it's.
Yeah, and I'll pull this real quick because same as NFL Europe years ago, it's not the same because basketball is already established in Europe. You already have these teams that are 50, 60 years of history
Right.
as established teams in Europe as basketball teams. This isn't creating all new, teams out of whole cloth and introducing a sport where people are, I am not trying to be insulting, but people aren't really, they don't know it, they don't love it like it was with the NFL. Basketball is already, a lot of European countries, it's probably the second most played and second most popular team sport. I would never suggest outside of Lithuania, any European country, that it's more basketball is more popular than soccer.
No, not close.
But that's the only country where that's true. Maybe some of the Balkan countries or I'm sorry, Balkan, Adriatic, I think. No, messing those up, right? Like former Yugoslavian countries, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, those countries probably starting to tip for a few of them might be basketball, but probably still soccer. But it's getting close with that. So yeah, it's it's just kind of keep an eye on it. The NBA is going to do something in Europe, and it's going to be far more successful than NFL Europe ever was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's go here. Let's say you guys got hired to be a GM for one fringe contender in the West. Would that threat of Wemby and future of OKC make you more or less likely to go all in? I think it would really depend on the situation. Like, do I have a player that I think is a 1A star for the future or not? That would go a long way towards determining what it is that I want to do if I'm in the West right now.
Yeah, like if I get hired to run the Nuggets today, I would 100% go all in right now.
Yeah.
Because, let me try to maximize Jokic right now today before Wemby's ready and before maybe OKC's fully formed and ready. Because, that's it. But if I was Houston, I'm not going to let it scare me off because you never know what will happen. Right. I mean, we've all been there OKC previous example was, a really good, good test case for this. We all crowned them when they went to that series against the Heat, their league for the next decade to run. And they haven't been back to a final since. So it's things happen, and I'm not saying that at all to say there's going to be a repeat with OKC this year, because it's not. It's a completely different situation. They're just in a far better place this time around with a million different things. But this stuff happens. We think teams are going to be there forever, and then sometimes they don't ever make it, and then other times it's that window ends up this big and it's over within a couple years.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's an and that's just sports.
Yeah,
there's an unpredictability to it. You don't know what's going to happen for sure. You can try to project out, but Keith, I mean, years ago it was, NBA teams project out 5 years, and that's what they plan. It's feeling more and more like it's like 4 or 3 now that you can. I mean, with any kind, and no certainty even on a year, but with any kind of hope of being correct or accurate, because things just shift and change so quickly in this league.
Most contracts run 4 years or less. In the NBA, you have the handful that run 5. Every once in a while, you get it 6 if they sign the 5-year extension on top of the final year left. But yeah, I mean, that almost necessitates short windows. We're going to see what this does for teams like the Celtics, the Suns, the Bucks, the Timberwolves. Is the second apron going to be so restrictive that we can only live here for a couple years, and then we have to start the reset process? Because now what we are is we're an older team that's not quite as good, and we are stuck in the middle with all these big contracts. Maybe it will necessitate teams saying, we got to get off one of these bigger contracts or two to start recycling through to get up. So we'll see kind of how that comes together.
All right. AJ said, couldn't the Lakers get in on Cam Johnson using the Raptors to facilitate a trade, sending Brooklyn an expiring contract? I mean, potentially, but I think that, could they logistically do something like that? Sure, logistically they could. The question is if the Nets want 2 first-round picks, are the Lakers the team to give them that? Probably not. Probably
Well,
not.
and they don't really have expiring contracts left anymore either.
No, but that's what he's saying. Saying send contracts to the
Oh,
Raptors. The
get it, the
Raptors send expirings to the Nets.
Yeah, I don't think they're. Yeah, I guess the issue is you'd have to pay the Raptors to take on the contract,
Exactly.
and you'd have to pay the Nets, and the Lakers only really have the 2 picks. They don't have the young guys to throw in. They could get in on Cam Johnson. I just don't think it would be by bringing in a third team. It would be direct.
And you're definitely if you're the Lakers, you're making the call. But most teams are making the call right now on Cam Johnson. So I think it's a tough situation.
Yeah, he was called out as the by ESPN surveyed the NBA. He was called out as the most likely player to be traded. Was Cam Johnson. And I mean, you've heard him now connected to, I want to say it's at least 8 or 9 teams. So, I mean, that gives you a sense there.
What moves do you think the Lakers will or can make? I think they need more athleticism on the perimeter. We've talked about that a lot over on Lakers Nation. And they could use a physical backup quality big. They could use those 2 things. Would I turn down a wing? No, because you can't have enough wings in today's NBA period. But I think they need those things. As far as what they can make, I think a lot of it's going to come down. Keith, we talked about it before. So far every trade that's happened has involved expiring contracts, and now the only real expiring they've got is the just under $4 million for Jalen Hood-Schifino. So they don't have a lot of expirings to work with anymore. So I think it would take a team being willing to take back future salary, which might be a little bit tough. Look, as far as what they can make, it's going to depend on how the market shifts and how teams are behaving towards non-expiring contracts and how that kind of looks. I think they're going to do everything they can to try to find a move that they like and try to make something work. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out over the next, just under 3 weeks. I think they've got their work cut out for them. They do have future first-round draft capital that should have some value out there. And it'll come down to what is teams' tolerance for future money on the books. And that may vary on a team-by-team basis.
Yeah, 100%. That's going to be exactly what it comes down to. So if you're talking about Brooklyn might be like, we don't really want Rui Hachimura's second year on our books now. Or Brooklyn might be like, or we do if you give us something extra on top of that. Like, then that's it, right? You can always get there if you're willing to pay to get there. That becomes a challenge. I'm going to pull this one from our guy, D.A. Baracus, because he's always in the show. He's a big supporter. How does game limits play out midseason 2-way deals? Great question. You've seen a bunch of guys sign 2-ways recently. They get prorated. So what you do is everybody's allowed 50 games on a 2-way. So you figure out 50 out of 82, and then you prorate it to however many games are left, and that's what they get with the new team. So that's how that works out with that one there. This one's just kind of D'Lo revenge game tonight. Please don't lose, Lakers. We don't even know if he's going to play. Like who knows?
I mean, I think isn't he off the injury report?
Is he? All right.
I think he might be.
I don't know. I mean, maybe he rolled out the other night.
He was ruled out the other night, but last I saw was that both Ben Simmons and D'Lo are going to play. They did what the Heat did. They sat Bam against the Clippers. They're playing him against the Lakers. They sat D'Lo and Ben against the Clippers. They're going to play him against the Lakers.
If I'm the Lakers, I'm not overly concerned.
No. And that's what I talked about on the show. Like, you should still win the game. It shouldn't be.
Yeah. I mean, D'Lo might have his revenge game, and the Lakers still should.
That's exactly what I said. I said D'Lo could go for 30 or 40, and you should win the game. You need to find a way to win.
60. I mean, this team scored 60 points the other
total.
Night. So this one I thought was interesting because we've talked a lot about the expected records. I'll translate here. You guys surprised that the Lakers are 6th in the West, considering the roster needs a couple more pieces? We talked about it with the Kings being very unlucky. The stats tell us the Lakers have been fairly lucky. They've outperformed their expected record by 5 games, which is a pretty big amount. They're 21-17, and again, this is when you get to expected record, it's stats based plus who you've played. All the things that factor into it, the expected should be 16-22. So, so just, that's just something to factor in. And it's, then you look at, all right, but what's the rest of our schedule look like and all the things that go into that. Am I surprised they're 6th? No, that's about where I would have had them. right now, like in the mix. And I think when we talked preseason, I was like anywhere from 4 to like 8 would feel about right for the
Yeah.
Lakers. I didn't think they'd be fighting in the play-in tournament. The team that really shocked me was the Clippers, in
Yeah.
a good way. Like they have
They've been
vastly
much better.
outplayed what I thought they were. Especially, I really jumped off the Clippers when we got into a spot where it was where all the Kawhi stuff came out before the season that he was not going to be. Then I was like, all right, I'm out. Like that's like done.
And the Clippers, they were a team where the buzz out of training camp was, oh my God, our defense is going to be awesome, right? And I kind of dismiss that as, well, I mean, everybody feels like their team looks great when they're playing against themselves and they're doing all that kind of stuff in training camp and everything. Because you look at the personnel on the team and you go, okay, they should be an okay defense. They should be pretty solid, but are they like great? You wouldn't think so. But it turns out the defense has been greater than the sum of their parts. They've been very, very good on that. They've been one of the best defensive teams in the league, and that's allowed them to become overall a much more successful team than we would have predicted coming into the season.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Somebody else said Rockets. Yeah, I mean, they've been
Rockets as well.
Way ahead of schedule for where I thought. And then there's a bunch of teams that were disappointed in with that. So, yeah. And then there's a question here. I'll show it real quick. Lakers have enough cap space for a star when Braun retires. I mean, that's
depends on when that happens.
Yeah, we don't know when that'll happen. They'll be probably is the answer to that. So yeah. I think we're in a I think we got them all.
I think so. Well, we didn't get this. Am I affected by the wildfires? No, I'm okay there, but certainly prayers for everybody that's dealing with that and that terrible situation. As far as
100%.
JB Bickerstaff for Coach of the Year, he very well could be. I think there's a few coaches that we could certainly throw into the mix there. But he's on the short list for sure.
Yeah, this is a tougher year than a lot because some teams have really gone through some stuff this year. Like Jamal Mosley, for me, should be way up there for even having the Magic still with a winning record. He's been without his 2 and 3 best players a lot this season. Kenny Atkinson, for getting the Cavs to where they are. Mark Daigneault, we can't just – I hate that Coach of the Year becomes whose team overachieved the most. There's a component that's fair with that, for sure, but that's kind of what JB Bickerstaff would be, getting there. But Ime Udoka too should be in the mix. Like, we got a lot of guys that are in the mix. So yeah, I have no problem with JB Bickerstaff being in there. This is one where let's see what the second half brings, right? Because second half, if these teams fade at all, well, then maybe somebody else jumps up and snags a spot. But I'm gonna stump for my adopted hometown of Orlando a little bit because Jamal Mosley's he's done a hell of a job with that team, and they play really tough. And I'll tell you right now, they play the Celtics tonight. They come out and play super physical and aggressive against Boston, and Boston looks like they did in Toronto. They're gonna get killed. They're gonna get absolutely destroyed tonight by the Magic. So we'll see.
We'll see what happens. All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate you for joining the show. If you haven't done so yet, go check. I'll put the link for the basketball bulletin stuff in here. Here's the YouTube channel, and I'll put the Substack out there as well. Some great stuff going on in both of those places. So hopefully you guys will go check those out. And we appreciate y'all joining us for Front Office Friday. If anything happened,
Daredevil yesterday.
We
catch
did
the end of yesterday's show at the end.
We did. And if anybody has anything happens over the weekend, we'll jump on.
Yeah,
and we'll talk about it.
Be here.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Keith, I'm trying to stall because you predicted that right after we finish the show, trade will happen.
Yeah, so everybody knows my comment to Trevor was, I feel like we're either going to get a trade during the show or we're going to get a trade, right after we finish, and we haven't been there.
Nope.
No trade yet. Maybe this weekend. We'll see.
Maybe this weekend.
Feels like stuff's getting closer. Like we're just like all the reporting that's coming out on some of this stuff just feels like we're gonna get some movement.
Absolutely
happening with that. And then we'll close with this. Like spike. Let's go.
There we go.
Hit the likes. That helps a lot more than I was talking to somebody who does YouTube stuff, nothing to do with basketball. And they're like, you got to really push people to like your videos because it really pushes you up in the algorithm and helps people find you. So, yeah.
All right, everybody. On that, have a fantastic weekend. See ya and stay safe.